Before the pyramids, before writing, before cities rose from stone and empires ruled the earth, there was only survival. No kings, no borders, just humans, wild and wandering, learning to master fire and fate. I'm your host, and this is I'll Tell You What Happened. The untold story of how we lived before civilization. The Stone Age wasn't one moment, but a massive chapter in human history that spans an almost incomprehensible stretch of time. When we speak of this era, we're talking about the longest period of human existence, a time that dwarfs all of recorded history by thousands of generations. It begins around 2.5 million years ago and ends just 5,000 years ago. To put this in perspective, if human civilization were compressed into a single day, the Stone Age would occupy nearly 23 hours and 59 minutes. Everything we consider history, the rise and fall of Rome, the building of the pyramids, the Renaissance, the Industrial Revolution, all of it would happen in the final minute before midnight. For most of that vast expanse of time, humans didn't build monuments or empires. They didn't write laws or establish kingdoms. They hunted, they gathered, they survived, and in that survival, they laid the foundation for everything that would come after. The era is divided into 3 distinct periods, each marking profound shifts in how our ancestors lived, thought, and shaped their world. The Paleolithic, or Old Stone Age, stretches from the earliest tool used to about 10,000 years ago. The Mesolithic, or Middle Stone Age, represents a transitional period of roughly 5,000 years. Finally, the Neolithic, or New Stone Age, brings us to the threshold of civilization itself. Each phase marks major leaps in human development, from crude stone tools, chipped from river rocks, to the sophisticated farming villages that would eventually grow into the first cities. These weren't just technological advances. They were cognitive revolutions that fundamentally changed what it meant to be human. In the Paleolithic, our ancestors roamed in small bands across landscapes that would be unrecognizable today. Massive ice sheets covered much of Europe and North America. Saber-toothed cats stalked through forests where skyscrapers now stand. Giant ground sloths wandered across plains that are now buried under cities. In this alien world, early humans carved out their existence with nothing but their wits, their hands, and stones shaped into tools. They used these stone implements to butcher the massive animals they hunted. Mammoths whose tusks could span the width of a modern car, cave bears that stood taller than a man, Irish elk with antlers that stretched 12 feet across. They learned to make fire, perhaps the single most important discovery in human history, and they painted on cave walls, creating art that still moves us today, not for art's sake alone, but to speak to something greater. Perhaps gods they were beginning to imagine, perhaps memory they were learning to preserve. In the Mesolithic, as the great ice sheets retreated and the world warmed, tools became more refined and specialized. Humans developed fishing hooks carved from bone, bows and arrows that could bring down game at a distance, and even early boats that allowed them to cross rivers and lakes. The climate was changing dramatically, and so were humans, adapting to new environments and new opportunities with remarkable flexibility. In the Neolithic, the final phase of the Stone Age, we began to settle down. We learned to plant crops, to tame wild animals, to store food for lean times. We were becoming something entirely new in the history of life on Earth, not just survivors adapting to our environment, but builders actively shaping it to our needs. Life in the Paleolithic was brutal in ways that are difficult for modern minds to comprehend. There were no houses to shelter in during storms, no medicine to ease pain or fight infection, no certainty that tomorrow would bring food or safety. Every day was a gamble with death, and the odds were never in humanity's favor. People lived in caves when they could find them, or in makeshift shelters constructed from mammoth bones and animal hides. These weren't permanent homes, but temporary refuges, abandoned when the seasons changed, or when game moved on to new feeding grounds. Their lives depended entirely on successful hunts and the ability to read the subtle signs of seasonal migrations. They followed vast herds of mammoth, bison, and deer across continents, living as nomads in a world where staying in one place too long meant starvation. The division of labor was likely based on practical necessity rather than rigid social rules. Women, often pregnant or nursing, probably focused on gathering the roots, berries, nuts, and other plant foods that provided crucial nutrition and calories. But they weren't just foragers, they were the keepers of botanical knowledge, understanding which plants could heal wounds, ease pain, or induce visions. They knew the seasonal cycles of edible plants, the locations of the best gathering spots, and the preparation methods that could make toxic plants safe to eat. Men typically formed hunting parties, working together to bring down animals that could weigh several tons. These hunts required incredible coordination, planning, and courage. Imagine facing a woolly mammoth with nothing but wooden spears tipped with sharpened stone. The hunters had to understand animal behavior, track their prey across vast distances, and execute complex strategies that could take days to unfold. They built elaborate traps, drove herds over cliffs, and developed techniques for preserving meat that could feed the group for weeks. Children learned not through formal education, but through constant observation and participation. From the moment they could walk, they were absorbing the skills they would need to survive. They learned to identify animal tracks, to recognize edible plants, to chip stone into useful shapes. Play and learning were inseparable. Games that taught hunting skills, storytelling that preserved crucial knowledge, competitions that built the strength and coordination needed for adult life. Elders held a special place in these societies, serving as living libraries of accumulated wisdom. In a world without writing, they were the keepers of memory, passing down stories, techniques, and traditions through word and gesture. They knew the locations of seasonal camps, the migration patterns of animals, the properties of medicinal plants, and the complex social relationships that held the group together. There were no governments in the modern sense, no police forces or standing armies, but there was cooperation on a scale that would be remarkable in any era. Successful hunting required groups of people to work together with perfect coordination, often risking their lives for the benefit of others. There was custom and tradition that governed behavior, unwritten rules that had evolved over thousands of generations. There was no money, but there was trade. Obsidian from volcanic regions, shells from distant coasts, amber from northern forests, all carried along trade routes that spanned continents. The world was dangerous beyond modern imagination. Predators that could kill a human with a single swipe of their claws roamed freely. Injuries that would be minor inconveniences today could mean death from infection. Winters could last for months, with temperatures that would kill the unprepared in hours. Yet humans were learning how to think abstractly, to share knowledge across generations, to remember and plan and dream. Stone tools didn't just define the Stone Age, they created it, shaping not only how humans lived, but how they thought and evolved. The relationship between tools and human development is so fundamental that it's impossible to understand one without the other. The first tools were deceptively simple. Flakes of rock chipped from larger stones, creating sharp edges that could cut through hide, meat, and wood. These weren't carefully planned implements, but opportunistic solutions. Rocks broken in the moment of need. Yet even these crude tools represented a cognitive leap that separated early humans from every other species on Earth. They required the ability to see potential in raw materials, to understand cause and effect, to plan ahead. Over hundreds of thousands of years, tool-making became increasingly sophisticated. Humans learned to select the best types of stone, flint, obsidian, chert, materials that could be shaped with precision and held a sharp edge. They developed techniques for creating hand axes, scrapers, and spearheads, each designed for specific tasks. The process of making these tools required incredible skill, patience, and knowledge passed down through generations. But the real revolution that transformed human existence wasn't made of stone at all. It was fire, and its mastery represents perhaps the most important discovery in human history. The ability to create and control fire changed everything about how humans lived, thought, and evolved. Fire meant warmth during the brutal cold of Ice Age winters, allowing humans to survive in climates that would otherwise have been lethal. It provided protection from the predators that hunted in darkness, creating a circle of safety around human camps. Most importantly, fire enabled cooking, which had profound effects on human nutrition and even cooked food is easier to digest and provides more calories and nutrients than raw food. This dietary improvement may have been crucial in supporting the growth of larger brains, which require enormous amounts of energy to function. Some scientists believe that cooking was so important to human development that we literally cooked our way to intelligence, using fire to unlock the nutritional resources needed for our remarkable cognitive abilities. As brains grew larger and more complex, so did the capacity for language, abstract thought, and cultural transmission. Around campfires, people likely sang the first songs, told the first stories, and made the first plans that extended beyond immediate survival needs. Fire became the center of social life, the gathering place where knowledge was shared, relationships were formed, and culture was created. The invention of cooking also changed human anatomy in subtle but important ways. Cooked food requires less chewing, which may have contributed to changes in jaw size and tooth structure. The time saved by not having to chew tough raw food for hours each day could be devoted to other activities, social interaction, exploration, and the development of increasingly complex behaviors. Fire also enabled humans to extend their active hours beyond daylight, creating time for activities that weren't directly related to survival. In the flickering light of flames, people could work on tools, share stories, engage in social bonding, and develop the rich cultural traditions that would eventually become art, religion, and philosophy. The mastery of fire required not just the ability to create it, but to maintain it, transport it, and use it safely. This demanded planning, cooperation, and the development of specialized knowledge. Someone had to know which materials burned best, how to keep fires going in wet weather, how to prevent dangerous wildfires, and how to bank coals for the next day's use. Invention during this period wasn't just physical but cultural. Each new tool, each refinement in technique, each discovery about fire or food or shelter had to be communicated to others and passed down to future generations. This required the development of increasingly sophisticated forms of communication, memory techniques, and social structures for preserving and transmitting knowledge. Spirituality didn't begin with grand temples or organized religions. It began in the shadows of caves, in the flickering light of fires, in the quiet moments when early humans first looked up at the stars and wondered about their place in the vast cosmos. The cave paintings of Lascaux and Chauvet in France, along with dozens of other sites across Europe, Africa, and Asia, provide our most direct window into the minds of our Stone Age ancestors. These aren't simple decorations or idle doodles created during moments of boredom. They're sophisticated works of art that required planning, skill, and resources to create. The artists had to gather pigments from distant locations, create brushes and tools, and work in difficult conditions deep underground. The animals depicted in these caves are rendered with stunning accuracy and artistic skill. Horses gallop across stone walls with such lifelike motion that they seem ready to leap from the rock. Bison are shown in profile with perfect anatomical detail. Cave bears rear up on their hind legs with expressions that capture their fierce power. These artists understood animal anatomy, behavior, and movement with the precision of modern zoologists. But these paintings weren't created for aesthetic appreciation alone. They were likely part of complex rituals, perhaps designed to ensure successful hunts, to honor the spirits of animals that had been killed, or to communicate with supernatural forces that controlled the natural world. The locations of many paintings deep in caves, in chambers that required dangerous journeys to reach, suggest that creating and viewing them was a sacred act. The evidence for early spiritual beliefs extends far beyond cave art. Humans began burying their dead with care and ceremony, a practice that appears in the archaeological record around 100,000 years ago. These weren't simple disposals of bodies, but elaborate rituals that suggest belief in an afterlife or spiritual continuation beyond death. Some burials included tools, weapons, and ornaments, as if the deceased would need these items in whatever realm awaited them. Others included flowers, as evidenced by pollen found in ancient graves, suggesting that even in death, beauty and remembrance were important. The positioning of bodies, often in fetal positions or facing specific directions, indicates that these burials followed established customs and beliefs. Small figurines carved from stone, bone, and ivory provide another glimpse into Stone Age spirituality. The famous Venus figurines found across Europe and dating back over 25,000 years are among the most intriguing artifacts from this period. These small sculptures typically emphasize feminine features, breasts, hips, and reproductive organs, while faces and extremities are often minimized or absent entirely. The Venus of Willendorf, perhaps the most famous of these figurines, was carved from limestone and originally colored with red ochre. Her exaggerated feminine features have led to various interpretations. She may have been a fertility goddess, a symbol of abundance and survival, or a representation of the divine feminine principle that early humans saw as essential to life and continuity. These figurines weren't isolated artifacts but part of a widespread cultural phenomenon that spanned thousands of miles and thousands of years. Their consistent features across such vast distances suggest shared beliefs or cultural exchanges that connected Stone Age peoples across continents. The use of ochre, a red mineral pigment, appears in archaeological sites around the world and dates back over 100,000 years. This material was used for body painting, cave art, and burial rituals. The color red may have held special significance, perhaps representing blood, life force, or spiritual power. The effort required to obtain and process ochre, often involving long journeys to specific geological formations, indicates that its use was important enough to justify significant investment of time and resources. Musical instruments from the Stone Age, including bone flutes and percussion instruments, suggest that music was an important part of early human culture. These instruments required considerable skill to create and play, indicating that music wasn't just casual entertainment, but a sophisticated cultural practice. Music may have played roles in religious ceremonies, social bonding, storytelling, and the transmission of cultural knowledge. These early signs of religion, art, and symbolic thinking reveal something profound about our Stone Age ancestors. Even before cities, before writing, before the complex institutions we associate with civilization, Humans were searching for meaning beyond mere survival. They were asking the fundamental questions that still occupy us today. Why are we here? What happens when we die? How should we live? What forces control our destiny? The Neolithic period brought a transformation so profound that it's often called the Neolithic Revolution. Though revolution might be too dramatic a term for changes that unfolded over thousands of years, this was the dawn of agriculture, and it represents one of the most significant turning points in human history. The moment when we stopped being purely hunter-gatherers and began to actively shape our environment to produce food. This transformation didn't happen overnight or in a single location. Instead, it emerged independently in multiple regions around the world, suggesting that the shift to agriculture was an almost inevitable step in human development once certain conditions were met. The Fertile Crescent, stretching from modern-day Turkey through Iraq, was one of the earliest centers of agricultural development, where humans first domesticated wheat, barley, and legumes around 11,000 years ago. In China, rice cultivation began along the Yangtze River around 9,000 years ago, while millet was domesticated in the Yellow River Valley. Mesoamerica saw the development of maize, beans, and squash, the three sisters that would sustain complex civilizations for thousands of years. In the Andes, potatoes and quinoa were domesticated, while in Africa sorghum, yams, and other crops were brought under human control. The process of domestication was gradual and probably unconscious at first. Hunter-gatherers had always known which plants were edible and when they ripened. They may have begun by simply protecting wild stands of useful plants, clearing competing vegetation, or scattering seeds in favorable locations. Over generations, they would have selected the largest seeds, the plants that were easiest to harvest, or those that ripened at convenient times. This selection pressure gradually changed the plants themselves. Wild grains have seeds that shatter and scatter when ripe, making them difficult to harvest efficiently, but occasional mutant plants would have seeds that stayed attached to the stalk, making them easier to collect. Humans would naturally gather more of these non-shattering seeds, and when some were accidentally dropped or deliberately planted, they would produce more non-shattering offspring. Similarly, wild plants often have bitter or toxic compounds that protect them from being eaten. Humans would have selected plants with lower levels of these defensive chemicals, gradually creating crops that were more palatable and nutritious. The process took thousands of years and countless generations of plants and people, but it fundamentally altered both species involved. The domestication of animals followed similar pattern. Dogs were probably the first domesticated animals, descended from wolves that learned to live alongside human groups, scavenging scraps and providing protection in return. Sheep, goats, cattle, and pigs were domesticated in various regions, chosen for their docility, their ability to thrive in human-controlled environments, and their usefulness for meat, milk, hides, and labor. Farming allowed for permanent settlements in ways that hunting and gathering never could. When your food comes from specific plots of land that must be tended, weeded, and harvested at particular times, you can't simply pack up and move when resources become scarce. This led to the development of the first villages, permanent structures built to last for generations rather than seasons. With permanent settlements came new technologies and crafts. Pottery became essential for storing grain and other foods, leading to increasingly sophisticated ceramic traditions. Weaving developed to create textiles from plant fibers and animal hair. Food storage techniques became crucial for surviving the months between harvests, leading to innovations in preservation, granaries, and distribution systems. But farming also brought new challenges and problems that hunter-gatherers had never faced. Agricultural societies were vulnerable to crop failures, droughts, and pest infestations in ways that mobile foragers were not. When your survival depends on the success of specific crops in specific locations, a single bad season can mean starvation for entire communities. Farming also meant harder physical labor for many people. Archaeological evidence shows that early farmers often suffered from more back problems, joint wear, and repetitive stress injuries than their hunter-gatherer contemporaries. The varied, seasonal work of foraging was replaced by the repetitive, intensive labor of planting, weeding, and harvesting. Perhaps most significantly, agriculture enabled population growth and social stratification in unprecedented ways. Farming could support much larger populations than hunting and gathering, but it also created the possibility of food surpluses that could be controlled by some individuals rather than others. This led to the emergence of social hierarchies, specialized occupations, and eventually the complex political structures we associate with civilization. The agricultural revolution also had profound environmental consequences. Forests were cleared for farmland, wild animal populations were displaced or hunted to extinction, and entire ecosystems were transformed to serve human needs. This was the beginning of the Anthropocene, the geological age in which human activity became the dominant force shaping the Earth's environment. Yet despite its challenges and costs, the shift to agriculture was irreversible and transformative. It provided the foundation for everything that followed. Cities, writing, complex technologies, art, literature, science, and all the achievements and problems of civilization. The Neolithic Revolution didn't just change how humans obtained food. It changed what it meant to be human. We may live in an age of smartphones and space travel, but we carry Stone Age minds in modern bodies. Our brains, our instincts, our deepest psychological patterns were all shaped by the hundreds of thousands of years our ancestors spent as hunters. Understanding this legacy is crucial to understanding ourselves and the world we've created. Our brains evolved in small, tight-knit groups, where everyone knew everyone else, where reputation mattered more than wealth, and where cooperation was essential for survival. This is why we still crave belonging, why gossip and social status consume so much of our attention, and why we find it difficult to care about abstract problems affecting people we'll never meet. We're wired for tribal thinking, because tribal thinking kept our ancestors alive. The fears that seem irrational in modern contexts make perfect sense when viewed through Stone Age eyes. We're afraid of snakes and spiders, even though car accidents and heart disease are far more likely to kill us. We're terrified of being alone in the dark, even though we're probably safer in our homes at night than we are driving to work in the morning. These fears were adaptive for our ancestors, who faced real dangers from predators, venomous creatures, and the vulnerability that came with isolation. Our attraction to certain landscapes also reflects our Stone Age heritage. Studies show that people across cultures prefer environments that resemble the African savannas, where humans evolved. Open grasslands with scattered trees, water sources, and elevated vantage points. These preferences show up in everything from landscape painting to park design to the suburbs we choose to live in. We crave stories because stories were how our ancestors transmitted crucial survival information. The ability to learn from the experiences of others, to understand cause and effect through narrative, to remember important lessons through memorable tales. These were literally matters of life and death. This is why we're drawn to movies, novels, and even gossip. We're still using the same cognitive mechanisms that helped our ancestors learn which plants were poisonous and which hunting strategies worked best. Our need for ritual and ceremony also echoes Stone Age practices. The elaborate rituals surrounding births, coming of age, marriages, and deaths that appear in every human culture may have evolved from the need to strengthen social bonds and transmit cultural knowledge. Even secular modern societies create their own rituals. Graduation ceremonies, sporting events, political rallies that serve similar functions of group bonding and identity formation. Many Stone Age skills and knowledge systems remain relevant today, sometimes in surprising ways. Indigenous peoples around the world have preserved traditional ecological knowledge that modern science is only beginning to appreciate. Traditional hunting and tracking skills are being used by modern military forces and search and rescue teams. Herbal medicine traditions that began in the Stone Age continue to provide the basis for modern pharmaceuticals. The Maker movement, with its emphasis on crafting objects by hand, represents a return to Stone Age values of self-sufficiency and direct engagement with materials. Bushcraft and survival skills are experiencing a renaissance as people seek to reconnect with the practical knowledge that sustained our ancestors. Even modern cooking shows often emphasize techniques, fire, fermentation, preservation, that were developed thousands of years ago. Our relationship with technology also reflects Stone Age patterns. We use tools to extend our capabilities. Just as our ancestors used stone axes and spears, we form social networks to share information and resources, just as hunter-gatherer bands did. We compete for status and resources, though the nature of those resources has changed dramatically. The environmental challenges we face today are in many ways the result of Stone Age minds trying to cope with post-Stone Age problems. Our ancestors lived in a world where resources were generally scarce and immediate. Consumption was usually the best strategy. This is why we struggle with long-term thinking about climate change, why we have difficulty moderating our consumption, and why we tend to prioritize immediate benefits over future costs. Understanding our Stone Age legacy doesn't mean we're doomed to repeat ancient patterns, but it does help explain why certain problems are so persistent and why certain solutions feel so difficult. We can use this knowledge to design better institutions, create more effective policies, and make more informed choices about how we want to live. The Stone Age also offers lessons about resilience, adaptability, and human potential. Our ancestors survived ice ages, volcanic eruptions, droughts, and countless other challenges with nothing but their intelligence, cooperation, and determination. They developed sophisticated technologies, created beautiful art, and built complex societies without any of the resources we take for granted today. In many ways, the Stone Age represents humanity at its most essential. Stripped of all the complexities and distractions of modern life, focused on the fundamental challenges of survival, cooperation, and the fact that we not only survived but thrived during this period, that we developed language, art, spirituality, and technology under the most challenging conditions imaginable, speaks to the remarkable resilience and creativity of the human spirit. So the next time you hold a tool, tell a story, or gather around a campfire, remember, you're not just a modern human, you're the echo of 1,000 generations, carrying within you the wisdom, the fears, the hopes, and the dreams of ancestors who faced down mammoths with nothing but sharpened stones and unbreakable will. The Stone Age didn't end. It evolved, and it lives on in every choice we make, every story we tell, every fire we kindle against the darkness. If this journey through deep time has lit a spark in your imagination, follow the trail, like, subscribe, and share this story with others who hunger for the untold chapters of human experience. Because I'll tell you what happened is just getting started, and there are countless more stories waiting in the shadows of history.